Welcome, everyone. My name is Randy Austrian. I have now been with Paragon for about 15 months now, started back in March of 2025. I've been in the construction technology space since 2002. Prior to that, I was a framer. And so we are so happy to have you for our office hours. Thanks for joining us. And really, the intent of these office hours, this is our third one now, we're doing them every other month. And the intent of this is to really provide a space for you to ask your questions, even if you want to share your screen, just to make sure that you're not getting stuck on anything, or if you're curious about anything, we can cover those topics. So that's number one. And then the other piece is that it's an opportunity for us to highlight some of the features that have recently been released in the last couple months. And then another piece of that is if we are seeing themes coming in through the help desk, we can cover those items too. All right, so the intent of this really is for it to be interactive, much more interactive than, say, a webinar format where you're just being talked at. I realize I'm talking at you right now in a sense, but again, we really encourage your engagement. So one thing that I would ask is, if you're up for it, if you do see something that you like, especially for those either new or existing users, just type a W there in your chat. W for wow. Wow, that blew my mind. That really is helpful to help us understand what's hitting, etc. So with that being said, let's get to it. The only formality I would like to get out of the way here is, since we do have some new and prospective clients out there, it's important that to understand the majority of the stuff we're going to be talking about today is currently in the software. It's available in the software. Most of it's been recently released in the last couple months or so, but it is possible that we'll talk about some things that are coming out in the future. But please, if you are looking at making any purchasing decisions, that type of thing, please base those decisions based on what you see today and not necessarily on what we are talking about for the future. And again, the intent of these office hours is really to help you solve design problems, use the software, get better, understand some of the new tools, really connect with the Paragon user community, and then again, kind of discover new tools. So with that, today's topics that we have prepared, and again, we certainly can pivot, and number one is answering your questions. Number two is getting through some of these new topics and highlights. But here we are. So in the last couple months, we've made some big improvements around improving the bearing workflow, including walls and beams, and we'll break these down further. We've implemented additional snapping controls, some interactive editing of walls, beams, and other objects within layout. You may have encountered that already. We've got, again, with those walls and beams, we've got flush beams and drop beams, but a huge step in the right direction is now that we are able to pick up bearings at flush beam conditions. So we'll dig into that. Multiple PDF, we're able to bring in multiple PDF underlays now and manage the visibility around that. Some additional visibility controls for filtering and viewing unlinked and linked components, whether you're in layout or in design. And if we have time, we can get into some more advanced features of user-defined connections. And then finally here, this is one of these that has come in quite a bit into the help desk, and how to make use of the linked and unlinked components and choosing existing components. So we may not go in this order, but we are going to be covering these topics. And if you do have anything that you want to make sure to cover, by all means, drop those in the chat, and that'll let me know that we need to leave some room at the end, as we have a lot to cover. All right. Again, remember to drop in those W's if there is something that you find wow-worthy. All right. Let's get to it. So first thing on the docket, improved bearing workflow. So bearing envelopes are now walls and beams. We've got this initial start point. So just initiating bearings input, walls and beam input is going to be a little smoother now. We've changed the left and right ends of walls to a start and an end point. We'll see that. We've got two different input modes now. We've got length and direction, and then there's a snapping, a mousing option. Those were essentially two different things in the past, and now they've been merged. And again, it's to the intent there is to reduce it and make it a little smoother. We've got a insert automatically, which is going to change workflow a bit, but provide additional options for you when you're inputting and creating new walls. The escape key, we've got some functionality in there, whether you hit the escape key once versus twice. Undo as well, so some improvements around undo. And then we're going to take a look there at flush and drop beams. All right, so again, I'm keeping an eye on the chat window. Make sure to drop anything in there if you got any questions, etc. All right, here we are. So I have a clean slate in this layout. We are in layout mode. We've got essentially nothing in this layout quite yet. It is I do have multiple buildings and multiple levels. We want to explore that. But first things first here, we're going to just explore what's new with our bearings and more specifically walls and beams. So we'll get started by just creating some walls. And note here, so this is, again, there's a lot of new functionality with what we're looking at today. And we can see that when we start with a wall input or a beam input, it comes in having the start point anchored. I happen to be in ortho, so you can see me pivoting. We've got the dimension here on the active dimension. So you could use that if you just want to go to 15 feet and snap, you can do that. And then, but that's not what we're going to free form some of this, or just kind of create some walls just for the sake of today's session. And I'm just going to start off by doing some conventional wall input. So I'm hitting the right arrow key on my keyboard. That's going to take me to the right, and we can see it just input that automatically. And what I'm going to do next here is I could keep drawing these things in, so that's all good. I can turn that off, and now I can say I want to go up 10 feet and enter. I can take this left 30 feet, enter. So that is the direction and distance. That's what I'm doing, and that requires an enter key. So down 5, enter, and so on. Okay. The next thing that I'm going to do here is to turn on the insert automatically. And this is going to change workflow a little bit. So here, notice I have the values populated in the length field. And I'm typing on my keyboard 20 feet. And as soon as I hit a direction, such as the left arrow, it's going to place that. I can do 20 feet and hit the down arrow, and it's going to place that.
A note to add there with Randy, as soon as he starts typing, that length box becomes highlighted, and the values you start enters in that box itself. You don't have to click in there, you don't have to tab, you don't have to press enter. As soon as you start typing, that length box is filled with the value that you're typing in. And then as soon as he presses the arrow key, both of those pieces are satisfied with a length and a distance, a length and a direction, and that then sends that wall or the item that you're creating in that direction with the value that you entered in.
Great point. Thank you, Jonathan. All right, so now we've got just a hodgepodge of walls here. This is messy. Here I'm going to actually make use of the snap points. I can hover above here, snap there, and so on. So that's all good. And I clicked escape once. Okay, and you can see that it relieved my cursor from that previous endpoint, and now I could start somewhere else. All right, so that's a huge step in the positive direction here. I hit escape again, I can come up here. I can pick so those are a couple big items there. If I hit escape again, it's gonna remove me from the entire input session. I'm gonna do that again here, and there you have it. I'm going to, next I'm gonna re-enter wall input mode. I'm gonna turn off those dimensions. And I'm gonna just drop in a few walls up here, just free form. And next I'm gonna hit Control Z to undo, and you'll see what happens here. So undo, it's gonna remove that last point. I'm gonna undo again, take me back to that previous point, undo again, it's gonna take me back to that origin. So some additional improvements around that. All right, I hit escape. I'm gonna escape again, and that's going to get me out of the wall input mode. All right. The next thing we're going to touch on, we're going to drop in a few bearings, a few beams. We'll do some drop beams and some flush beams. And in order to have kind of a snap point for my beams, I'm just going to extend this wall through. So as every existing users know, we've got the ability to trim and extend. There's a really nice hotkey for that. You hold down Shift, holding down Shift on my keyboard, and I can hit a cutting edge. Here I hit that as the cutting edge, that is the cutting edge. So that's pretty cool. I'm going to undo twice. That was Control Z, Control Z. And there is some new functionality here that was recently introduced, and that's going to allow me to stretch the end of a wall. You can see I use this reference point there, right? And it's recognizing that. Breaking that up, it's recognizing that, and so on. So you've got a few tools, at your disposal. And actually, before I go and put in the beams, I'm gonna show this other one here. It's these interactive editing tools. So we just showed how to extend or stretch a wall, if you will. What we're gonna do next here is we're gonna take those, what is that, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 walls, and notice the cursor is going to change from the crosshair to a move. And what this is going to allow me to do is to move chunks or multiple entities, one or more entities, objects. I can just move them freeform. Now it's freestyle, and that's what you say, what's the use case for that? Valid question. But what I can do here is I can actually go and piece these things together. See all of those different references? So I have these snap points all over the place. So I could do this and so on. So I think that's pretty neat. I'm going to actually align those, and then I can clean these things up. Again, using some modification commands. So again, really easy to clean things up there. All right, back to where I was going, which is beams. So we're going to put in some drop beams. Here, let's call this a front porch or something like that. So we first define the beam type. It's a drop beam. The top elevation is at 8 feet, which is the top where I have the top of the wall. If I wanted to say I wanted that beam to be 1 foot, I could do that. We have plies and thickness as well. So if you don't want to do the math, and you've got an 1 3/4 inch, a 3-ply like LVL or something like that, you could do that. And let's see, I want that to go front. I'm gonna just draw these in here. Again, you can use the same input tools. I'm gonna use my ortho and hover above that snap point, and insert. I've got the same tools to insert automatically, etc. All right, escape once, it releases my endpoint, and now I can start again. I'm going to drop in a flush beam here. This is a kind of a crazy example, but I'm going to show you this in advance of showing you some really neat new functionality with flush bearing recognition. So I'm going to change this to a flush beam. I'll keep it as the 1 3/4 inch and 3-ply. Center doesn't really matter. I'm going to go here. Oh yeah, this 8 feet. I'm going to change the depth here, 10600, for example, and you can see how these are all interacting together. So that's going to take a little getting used to. The bottom elevation is what's key for that flush beam, right? So I was just showing you some how it interacts with one another, but I want that bottom to be at the top of plate. I want that depth to be 1'6". How about I try that again and get 1'6", so on. So this first beam is going here. Hit escape once. Oh, how about I place that first? Now I'm, excuse me, here we go. Let's go. Hit escape again, and I'm going to put this one in and insert. Hit escape. I can get going again, and I'm just, again, if I wanted to come, let's go, we'll do something here. And those are totally misaligned because I was going freestyle. But again, if I hold down, if I held down the Alt key there, which enables that insert automatically, I'm going to hold down Alt again. If you would, keep an eye on the bottom right here. So I'm holding down Alt, and it automatically drops that in there. Okay. So I'm actually going to get rid of those 2 beams that I just dropped in. I'm going to drop that. And let's take a look at this in 3D. So we've got our drop beams here. We've got our flush beams there. We've got additional visibility controls. We can see now we have control of beams, solid beams, and hatched when you're in 2D. And then the walls, I'm not sure if 2 months ago this was available or not. We released this relatively recently, but we have different visibility and controls for load-bearing walls or structural walls versus non-structural walls. All right. All right, I'm gonna reference my notes here, folks. And again, I mentioned this in the intro, but instead of having the left point and the right point, we now have start and end for our walls and our bearings. We touched on the length and distance versus being able to snap, the using direction, distance, and hitting the enter key versus doing the insert automatically. We reviewed the escape key, how to really navigate around the model quickly using the escape key to release your snap point or to exit the kind of the input or creation session. Undo, some big improvements with undo, and then we've got our flush and drop beams. Okay, so before we move on to our next topics, do we have any questions around anything that you just saw there with bearing input, and by bearings, walls and beams, flush and dropped? James.
Yeah, when you have a building that has multiple elevations on the same floor, we have a lot of 2-story houses and stuff that has all kinds of different,
Plate heights
and stuff. When you're putting in the bearing, when you're doing the level elevation, like you have a certain elevation height or a plate height on the elevation on the level, then you have multiple different heights with the walls. What is the best way to put that in? Do you want to put the lowest ceiling height for the level?
Yeah, what I would typically do, and I do have a multi-level building over here. If I take a look, I'll try to not let us get too far into the weeds here. I'm gonna hide the stuff we don't care about right now. But what I would do is I would identify or define I would define the level elevation, right? The level plate elevation as the most common on that level. So that's what I would start out with. Actually, this is a good example. I'm gonna turn off those feature pattern trusses too. So this particular layout we've got some, what are those, 10-foot walls, 12-foot walls. We've got 12-foot walls over here, and then the majority of them are at 9'4". So what I've done here is I've defined the level properties with a plate elevation of 9'4", and then you can, again, you'll find what is most efficient for you. What is most efficient for me is I will put all of the walls in at 9'4", and then I'll go back through and I will select the walls that need to have a different plate height. I'll just select them and then change the property. So that's how, again, you'll find what works most efficiently for you, but that's what I find most efficient. And then the hatching, by viewing it in the hatching, that hatching visibility or the hatching view, it allows you to QC yourself and just to double check.
Okay, and you select multiple via with shift key?
Control.
Control.
So, yep, no, I do not have control selected right now, and you see what's happening?
Okay.
I hold down control, and there you go. Notice it didn't select that beam back here.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. All right, any other questions here before we pick back up? All right, keep them coming. All right, next, we're going to look at some of these smarter snapping controls and snap settings. And then I gave you a little preview of the interactive editing, but we'll cover that a little bit more here. All right, so snap settings. We have a new snap setting icon up here. So what does this actually mean? So the snap settings are, I don't know if you call them kind of predefined contextual snap settings based on what command you're in. That's the contextual part. So similar, the active snaps and the snap against should look pretty similar to whenever you're in any type of input mode, right? We're used to having these come up over here. But what these are, so again, I'm in wall creation mode. What these are contextual. So I'm in beam input mode, wall input mode, I think, wall creation mode. And we can see there are these different, I don't know if you want to call them styles or preset groups that just predefine what snap settings are available and possible. All right. So I encourage you to work within this area. I'm going to show you an example. And this is going to be for when I'm in an interactive beam or wall dragging mode. This is the type of thing that's going to be available. And I think this should be, I'm going to select the grid, and I'm going to do this in 2 stages. Okay. So we're going to go back and do this thing. I had the grid. The grid is available as snapping options. So it's going to be a little tough to see here, but I'm going to actually turn on that grid, and maybe it's going to be a little easier to see. So, all right. So if you can see, I'm trying to move my mouse incrementally, and it actually finds a snap. So it's snapping to that grid. Okay. Versus if I turn off the grid, and now it's not snapping. All right. So it's that type of functionality is going to be available to you in the depending on what, I don't know if you call it mode or what context you're in. So I'm in interactive beam or dragging mode, and then we've got the beam or wall input or insertion, creation, truss envelopes as well. And really the intent behind this is that it provides you more control to help you quickly find the snap point that you're looking to and reduce the opportunity to inadvertently snap to something. All right. All right. So there we are. Let me see if I can get that a little tighter there. And then we're back to where we were before. Personal preference, but I prefer working with the grid off. I find it a little noisy in the day-to-day. All right, so I touched on, let's see, that was a little bit with the snapping. Again, I showed this before with the I'll say the stretching, adjusting wall lengths, and you've got that active dimension. So that's pretty neat. Adjusting a wall position. Again, I can move this down. I'm going to see if I can actually get this to align. Oh, having a hard time getting that to align, but really, I'm gonna scratch this itch of mine. Because I'm crazy, I need these things to align exactly. And so I can move that over. Again, I'm just freestyling a few changes here, 0 to 12. And then you could select this one, either drag. I'm going to select this one and trim it. So holding down Shift and trim, and so on. All right, so a lot of great tools, and you'll find in some situations using the extend by shift clicking is going to be faster or more efficient. Dragging might be in some cases. Here we go. I've got 2 walls selected right now, and I can extend those through. What I haven't tried, this could be fun. I haven't tried that yet. I was wondering if that was going to adjust both walls. It does not. And there we go. So again, I encourage you to explore some of the different tools. Again, multiple ways to do certain functions, such as moving those walls, extending the walls, but you'll find what works best for you and your specific scenario. One word of caution I have with these interactive editing tools is be very mindful of your cursor, of the cursor type. Right? So when I'm in a standard mode, selection mode, etc., I've got just the crosshair cursor, but as soon as it changes to move or to stretch, if you left click, things are going to happen. All right. So a word of caution there. Okay, so again, we covered the smarter snapping controls, the customizable snap settings, allowing you to snap to certain objects, etc., and then the interactive editing. All right, any questions around that? Okay. All right, a few new items. And we've had a long-standing request in the queue in our development backlog to make workline input more efficient. And so we're going to be covering that. We've taken some of the best things from the reference line workflow within the design mode, and we've implemented them within layout as an initial implementation, initial step. There's certainly some more opportunities to improve and refine the work lines and layout, and we're going to be taking advantage of that, and you'll see continued changes with work lines to make it smoother, fewer mouse clicks, those types of things. We'll go ahead and explore some of those. All right, so as with our typical workflow, I'm going to right click and create a work line, or you can always go up here to the create option. All right, so when you are now creating a work line, you've got a new dialog. The right sidebar, the right panel, is very different than it used to be. We've got these different modes. Again, we've got the point-to-point and angle, parallel, perpendicular, and division line. So again, taking some of the functionality from design mode when you're putting in reference lines, and I'll say mimicking those here. With any of these input types, you have the ability to use bounding, and some of them you can use segments. So again, I haven't selected anything over here yet. And note that I have these snap points. I can either snap to an edge. I won't say snap. I can either define an edge, or it'll take me to a snap point itself. That's a midpoint intersection. And that allows you to get things kicked off without clicking any buttons. So here we are. I'm just going diagonal with a point to point. I could do a segment. This is going to get really messy. And here we are. I just hit insert. Notice we also have the insert automatically here. So I'm going to do insert automatically, define a new start point, and I'm going to just go here, and it automatically puts that in when I click enter. Excuse me, when I click the endpoint. And so on. All right. So that's an improvement right there. We stay in a continuous input mode. It doesn't leave the command, the work line command, when you're defining, after you're done defining. All right. So next, let's go explore some of our tools. So that was point to point. We've got point and angle. Excuse me, it didn't get the point and angle, and I didn't even click that yet. So you can see you've got your angle here. All right. So if I know I want to come down at a 45, there we are. I could just drop that in there. I'm in continuous mode, so or insert automatically, so just drop that in there. That's good. We've got our offset. So this is similar to what you're previously used to. We'll do some refinement where we're moving your cursor for you. So if you wanted to move this over 10 feet, hit the right arrow, and there you are. There's your line, and so on. All right, we've got point, so we've got perpendicular. If I want to place a line perpendicular here that is in line with this beam, I can do that here and insert. There we are. So now I've got that line there. And then we've got our division line. And this is similar or borrowing the functionality again from design mode, where we're doing these, able to specify what kind of a start and end. And this is going to divide it in two. Again, in design mode, you're able to use the plus and minus arrows to determine how many divisions, if you will, to place work lines or members. And so that type of functionality will continue to be enhanced. Okay. So there we are. We've got a whole bunch of reference lines, excuse me, work lines that I'm likely going to get rid of next. All right, so here we are, work lines. See you later. And let's see, the last couple things I want to do here with work lines, I'm going to use the bounding and segment to next demonstrate some of the flush bearing improvements here. So I'm going to define bounding and segment. I'm going to define that here. And I'm going to do one more. And insert. Again, I can use the insert automatically, or the Alt key, right? Holding down Alt key when you select an endpoint is going to keep you in that continuous mode. All right, so I've got my bounding and segment reference lines here at the faces of those girders, those flush beams. All right, any questions on anything we just covered there or adjacent? Okay. All right, for the next demonstration, I'm going to actually demonstrate some of this flush bearing recognition and improvement around there. So for existing users, it's long been a challenge where if you had trusses, for example, that were spanning between these two flush members, that it wouldn't recognize any bearings whatsoever. And therefore, you found yourself having to create false bearings and then editing those things when you're in design. So not ideal, several extra steps, and we have improved that, and we're going to continue to improve that as we continue to enhance functionality. So in order to demonstrate this, I'm going to drop in, I could put in some floor trusses, but in this particular case, I'm going to drop in roof planes. I had mentioned holding down the Alt key when performing certain commands. I'm going to do that here. So I'm going to hold down the Alt key, and it's going to leave me in this continuous input mode. Coming back down here, There you have it. While I'm at it, may as well go here. Great. So I can hit escape now. And there are my planes. We continue to make improvements around auto cutting. And this will be interesting to see how it interprets this. I don't imagine it's going to get it right the first time, because it's going to be there's some tricky stuff there. So it did a pretty darn good job here. Got this, but we got that weird jog here. So I wouldn't expect it to get that dialed in, but I don't know. It's pretty good. It did do a pretty good job. So I'm going to work with that for now. I definitely don't like what is going on for this demonstration where I have that flush beam. So I'm going to use some of these, again, some of those editing tools that we have. And I'm going to move this down. I'm going to move this one down. I'll put it right there with that one. There we go. I think that's, oh, I overlooked that. And now it looks like, so we did not implement the work line, that movement with the interactive. That's just for walls and bearings. But what I can do here is I can move that work line now to that new location. So I'm just going to move that over here, and there we are. All right, the reason I wanted to do this is, actually now I've got to change this, get that beam back over there, and I'm going to get these walls over there. All right, I'm going to drop in a truss, some trusses, truss envelopes. And let me make sure to turn those on. And there's my truss envelope. And notice it's being bound by the reference lines, those bounding reference lines on the face of those flush members. If I place it up here, it's going up here and it's still bound. Notice here that the girder, or excuse me, this floor truss that I have, wow, this roof truss, this truss envelope that I'm putting in does not automatically recognize the face, I'll say the rear face of that flush member. So we don't have that 3D geometry detection yet, but that is something that we're going to be looking to improve. So make use of those bounding work lines to control that, or you could always place it and then use the trim, extend hotkeys, the shift select to finalize your left and right ends, etc. But the purpose of this particular demonstration here is to show off the new functionality of the flush bearings. So I'm going to just click there to place that girder. Wow, gable. Having a hard time with my words today. I'm going to bring this out. And then look, as soon as it gets beyond those bounding work lines, it's now going to place these trusses on layout and so on. And I can keep this party going. All right. And there we have it. Again, if I wanted to continue to fill out this, I can do this, start run. There we are. While those are selected, I'm going to get that gable. While those are selected, I'm going to trim it back to that face. Here we are. Again, I'm just freestyling, showing you some ways to be very efficient. I'm going to use the mirror command. I'll mirror that about the ridge line. It's going to duplicate that existing. There you are. While those are selected, hold down the shift key, and there you have it. All right. Let's take a look at this in 3D. Oh, we'll take a look at that in 3D, and then we will end up designing those components at some point. But first, let's address James's question. James, what do you have?
Yeah, if you wanted full span trusses there, would it recognize the beams and put beam pockets in the trusses?
Not with what I have right now. So currently, the bottom profile of a truss is defined by the bearing elevation. So defined by a wall, essentially wall or beam, and also ceiling objects, ceiling entities, right? So you've got a tray ceiling or a vaulted ceiling or even a flat ceiling if you step it up. those types of things. So the way, so it's not going to auto detect that in 3D yet, based on the 3D geometry yet, right? And the same thing applies to if you have a ledger condition, it's not going to automatically notch the end of that truss. But those are all things that we plan to improve upon to reduce the amount of additional plane cutting and plane definition and those types of things to automatically step up at that flush girder.
So how would you do it now? Have to cut ceiling planes in the shape of the beam?
You got it. So I would do something like this. I would put in a flat ceiling plane here, insert and repeat. I would put another one here. And this is going to be fun.
You don't have to do it right now. But...
Wait, no, we're doing it, James. Oh, I missed that one. Let's go. So this really doesn't matter how I'm going to cut this thing in here, but what I do know is that I want to take this one and yeah, we'll cut that plane. I'll bring it up over. I'm holding down shift. Probably didn't need to do it at the gable, but work with me here. What I'm interested in where it actually placed that, because it was a flush member, whether it placed it on top of that or on the bottom. This is great. That's exactly what I wanted it to do. All right. So now what I can do is we'll take that envelope and I'm going to do a solid. And come on, fella. Yeah, I'm going to leave a few of these in here. I'm just going to grab these and bring them on over. Okay. All right. So that did not automatically pick it up, which I did not expect it to. What I can do here is I can take this, and it's going to be interesting to see if this works without a ceiling plane, without a vertical ceiling plane. And I want to add bottom cuts. And I want to add a series of bottom cuts. So adding bottom cuts from left to right, the triangles here on the truss will represent the left end. So I'm going to grab that ceiling plane that I didn't cut that 8-foot ceiling plane and I didn't flip it, but it really doesn't matter. So I can come here. I can hold down shift to come up that girder or that beam. I could click here to grab that raised section. I'm going to hold down shift, come back down 8 foot and finish. Let's see what happened. And there we go. Might be tough getting that one to pass. Although in reality, right, that you have that flush beam, you got that flush beam that's actually supporting that. I am really curious as to what's going to happen when we generate these truss designs, these component designs. Yeah, great questions, James. So the short of it is we don't automatically detect the 3D geometry of those flush bearings, but it is something that we are working toward. All right, now that I have all of these truss envelopes, I'm going to select them all. And I'm actually going to do this in 3D. We don't have any designs, and we are going to create designs. So create or match existing or create or match designs. And there we have it. Oh yeah, it did its best here. That roof is not deep enough. So I'm going to cheat a little bit here. I'm going to grab these and say I want that to be an 8/12 slope. Notice that the roof components did not automatically follow that new slope because those components are already designed, but the truss envelopes did. So this is a really important, I'll say, designation for the differences, and a good example of the differences of truss envelopes versus the component designs. I'm going to select all of those. This will be fun to do in 3D as well. And we are going to generate those components, and we're going to see that all of those components that were previously defined at a 4/12 are now going to change to an 8/12. And I thought I was in that view, and there we have it. And let me take a look at this one. Yeah, that's pretty sweet. It did pick up that bearing, so that's awesome. And then, especially for those existing users, you can see here, this is the truss bearing on that flush girder, and sure enough, it gets a hanger. So that should save a ton of extra work that you've been having to do to ensure there's a bearing on that end. All right, any questions? Okay, next thing on the list, and we got about 8 minutes left. Next thing on the list is we've got these component filters now. Prior to this, the filter was only available in design mode. So if we were to go in and look at this, oh, here's one of those trusses that has the hangers on both ends. We could go in and look at the filters. We can see all trusses or the unlinked trusses. And so you can filter that back and forth. That's available in both layout and design. For newer users, a linked envelope, you see this linked indicator. This means that there is a component design, so a truss design that is associated with that envelope, versus unlinked, which means these are all truss designs that don't have any relationship to a truss envelope within the layout. And we can get into the details and why that is valuable, but these are all, essentially, these are all the 412s. And if you want to just get rid of all of those, I'm going to select the first one, hold down Shift, hit the delete key. Are you sure? I am positive. Let's get rid of that stuff. And here we are. Okay, here is going to be a really good example. This truss right here, this, I'll say interior gable truss. It's a gable in that it's on a structural wall running parallel. But if I, for example, if I wanted this truss to be the exact same truss as 297, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to unlink this. And I want it to be the same truss as 297. And I'm going to go to choose existing. I'm going to choose truss 297. And there we are. Now those are the same designs. All right, so that is how you take, I don't know if you want to call it consolidating trusses, but if the system does not recognize a truss as being the same, in this case, it properly didn't define them as the same because the bearing condition is different, then you as the user can make a decision and kind of, I'll say, overwrite that, if you will. All right, we've got about 5 minutes left. I do have a couple more topics that we could cover, but want to make sure that there's plenty of opportunity, 5 minutes worth of opportunity for you all to ask questions on anything specific that you're looking to learn more about. Yeah, Derek. Oh, you're muted, sir.
Oh, there we go. Sorry.
Great.
Yeah, we were working on a couple projects. I was wondering if you guys have worked on the ceiling planes for doing coffer ceilings, the residential stuff.
Yeah, so the sloping.
No, not the vault, but more of, you got 8-foot truss bearing, and then 2 feet in, they want a 9-foot ceiling raise.
Okay. Yeah. So that's going to be a tray ceiling is what we're going to want to do there.
Okay.
And then, yeah, I was trying to get at whether or not that was going to be a vertical when you step in, or if it's going to be a 90. That's what I was thinking, but not using my words. All right. So our bottom elevation of that tray is at 8 foot. Our top elevation is at 9 foot. We can define the width of this thing. So I don't know. I'm just going to go 10 and 10 for the sake of this. And I want to take this from the left and upper, because I want it to be 2 foot and 2 foot off of the inside of this. And so I'll drop it right here. And then what I can do is I can actually move, I could move this now. So I could do plus 2 feet. And this is going to be what? Minus 2 feet. And there you are. Oh my gosh, did I really just do that? I hit escape. We're going to try this again. 8, 9, 10, 10, left, upper. Let's do this. So while that's selected, I'm curious if move is going to work. So I want to move that 2 and -2. Sorry, I just hit a hotkey for move, which is Control M. That's what I did there. I
Okay.
think that it's the truss design itself is probably not going to this right there at the ridge. Actually, the bottom chord, it should be fine. All right, so now, what do you think is going to happen with those trusses, right? Nothing. Nothing happened to those trusses. Now, if I look at the solid, that's going to be a different story. So let's go ahead, and what I want to do, I'm going to go back to solids, get rid of these planes. I'm going to grab these bad boys, regenerate the component, look at those designs, and now we're in business.
Nice. Now, does that work the same for vaulted ceilings?
Same thing.
Okay, cool.
So the again, the intent or what's the takeaway here is that the truss envelope shape is going to be defined by the ceiling geometry, but if it already has a component designed for it, that's not updated until you tell it to update it.
Yeah.
All right, we covered a whole lot of stuff today, and we are at time. So would love to hear, actually in the last minute, if you would drop in the chat window, if there's anything interesting or anything that you really like seeing, would appreciate that. And I'll close this out here. All right, and perhaps next go around, I'd lie to you, I really want to cover this one last thing. It is hugely valuable. And I think in the last session, or maybe even 2 ago, we introduced the PDF Underlays. And this is the changes that we've implemented here are so powerful that I want to show them off. And this one I already have, I have multiple PDFs available or visible, or excuse me, uploaded. For example, a great example here is I've got a lower level layout. I'm shadowing the upper level so that I can see where the tub is, right? Here's a tub up above. I've got a toilet right here on this truss TO1. That's probably not going to work, right? With the, because you need to get that toilet drop right there. The tub would be okay. We got another lab here. This is potentially not going to work, right? You want to go usually 12 inches off of the wall, and then you need some space. So that's probably not going to work either. So you can really use these underlays and then toggle them on and off as you see fit. Great way to trace walls and to identify the location of your stairwell girders. All right, so please take advantage of that. That is a very powerful new addition that we have here. So as we're wrapping up, we're 1 minute over. I apologize for that, but I just want to remind you all of the doc site. We are constantly updating the doc site. Same with the training. I know we've got some folks that are newer, trying to coming on, learning the software. One of the things that you've noticed is in those training videos, we use walls to reference beams. That's because we didn't have beams a year ago. We now have beams, so we'll be updating the training content as well. And then this is another one, status.paragontrust.com. If you ever are interested or need to know where, if there's an outage or if there are any issues with the application, you can go and check that out at any time. And this is what that looks like as it's loading here. And there we go. So I know some folks ask, especially when they're entertaining using Paragon and adopting Paragon, is what happens? What do you mean you don't use any files? It's cloud only. How do I ensure that I can access my trusses? Well, this should give you some idea of the consistency of the platform. Overall uptime over the last 90 days, 100%. Just keep that in mind. All right, that was some boring stuff. Important though. And again, here you are. We thank you so much for joining us today. Don't be strangers. Feel free to hit us up at help.paragontrust.com if you have any questions whatsoever. We're here to answer your questions and to do all we can to make you successful using Paragon. So with that, I thank you once again. Have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you next time.